Babylon, man, I've been so torn thinking about this world lately. Babylon, truth is so deluded and it drives me crazy. Babylon, this lost world is so hopeless. Babylon, Jesus Christ, that's where hope is. Babylon, no matter what they say, it's still so lost.
As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbonah, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. That is Esther chapter 7, verses 9 and 10.
And this is the Resisting Balaam podcast, a podcast where we seek to encourage the saints to stand firm with him on his word against all of the accusations made by the world, the flesh, and the devil, as we engage the culture of death that demands sacrifice of our children. I am Pastor Darren. I almost said I'm Pastor Callie. I'm having an identity crisis. Maybe it's the hat. I don't know. I am Pastor Darren. That was Pastor Callie. This is a Wrath and Grace podcast. You can find out more about Wrath and Grace on Facebook right now. Facebook.com/Wrath and Grace. Hopefully they're going to have their website back up here before too long, but they're developing a new app. I'm going to have some new content and new resources available on that when it comes out. So keep an eye out for that. Want to express our appreciation to those guys for hosting our podcast on their network. Also want to invite everybody to check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/Resisting Balaam. That's where you can support our ministry. You can come in as little as $3 a month or all the way up to $20 a month. Get access to early content. You get special member-only content. And then also you get, when you come in, I think it's at $15, you get a T-shirt. We have a coffee mug. You can get a copy of Callie's book, Matt logo, which is what you see right here. And so depending upon what tier you come in, anywhere from $3 to $20 a month, get the opportunity to get Resisting Balaam merchandise as well. So go on there and check that out. Want to say we appreciate our Resistance members, our Patreon members, because of their support. We're going to be traveling some events coming up here, and we're going to be continuing to push out new content. So want to take just a minute and talk about a couple of those events. Callie, you and I are going to be in Birmingham together for an Operation Save America event there. So all of our friends in Alabama, if you're in Alabama or that area, Tennessee, want to invite you guys to come out and join us at the Operation Save America regional event out there. It's going to be March. See, it'd have been helpful to have the dates ahead of time. This is the problem with me planning.
Try 13 through 15.
I knew you would have them. March 13th to the 15th. I want to invite you guys to join us out there. We'll also be in June. We'll be in Arizona for the Operation Save America national event. Both of us will be there for that as well. We might even have some T-shirts at those events, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
Yeah.
Well, T-shirts. Callie has some copies of his book to sell. And so come see us and hang out with us at those two events.
We'll also be in Indianapolis, June 4 and number 5.
Yep, we're going to be thank you for reminding me about that. That's the Cruciform Conference with our brother Brandon Scalf. So that'll be in Indianapolis, June 4th and 5th. So those of you guys are in like Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Ohio, that area. Love to have you guys come out and join us for the Cruciform Conference. You can find out more about that on the Cruciform Conference page on Facebook. So I want to invite everybody to join us at the events that we're going to be at. We're excited about some of the opportunities we're going to have. Both of us are going to be speaking at the Cruciform Conference, and I think the theme of that event is still standing. And I think that's going to be an awesome event. So I'm really looking forward to it. So
what are you speaking on?
I haven't decided yet. What does he have you speaking on?
Christian liberty and the imposition of man's invention on worship.
Yeah. So it's a long title. That's good.
Yeah.
I like it. I think I'm speaking on the doctrine of interposition, like the Reformed the reformed underpinnings of the doctrine of interposition, but we're still working out the details on that. So, yeah, man, I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be a great conference, and Brandon's doing a good job pulling that thing together. So, you have another thing that you're going to be at as well, right? You had another conference.
Right. So the day before the Birmingham conference, I will be filming in Knoxville, Tennessee, for the documentary I'm working on about snowflake adoption.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I will also be filming in Savannah after the conference. So I've got those things coming up. And then there's a couple of other conferences. I don't have them on the top of my head right now.
Yeah.
But we have a lot going on the next couple of months.
Yeah. Yeah, excited about some of the ministry that we're going to get to do. So, and I started all that expressing appreciation to our patrons because they definitely help out with us being able to travel around and do some of those things. So, okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to cover before we get into our topic for this episode?
No,
All
I'm. Let's do it.
All right. So, we're in the middle of this series that we're going through addressing objections. The last one I did a single episode about whether or not we should run all the plays. I appreciate you guys suffering through my inability to breathe through my nose for that episode. But one of the things that happened as I was recording that episode is I actually recorded an episode ahead of that episode on the objection that the objection that people have that you guys are wasting your time. You're never going to make abortion illegal. You're never going to criminalize abortion. Everything that you can't accomplish that in the political realm. It's completely and totally impossible. And I recorded an episode on that where our guest today, Zach Lautenschlager, and I had a whole discussion about that. It was a great discussion, and the technology messed up on us and it deleted. So what we're going to do today is we're going to re-record that discussion with Callie here as well. And so I want to invite Zach to come on. We're excited to have Zach on the show with us. He's got many, many years of experience in political activism, and I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself. But today what we're going to be talking about is whether or not it is impossible. Is it actually possible in the political sphere where we're at right now to make abortion illegal, to completely and totally criminalize abortion, and so, or abolish abortion, I should say. So, Zach, I want to bring you on, man. I appreciate you coming onto the podcast today. Why don't you introduce yourself and share a little bit with us about your experience, and then we'll kind of get into our topic.
Well, thank you, Darren. Thank you, pastors. It's a pleasure to talk with you both. It's a great topic that I enjoy discussing. My name is Zach Lautenschlager. I'm the past vice president of the National Association for Gun Rights. I've worked in professional paid politics for over 22 years. I have run hundreds of campaigns. I'm a professional lobbyist still, which I know is worse than being a lawyer, at least in the minds of some. But I've worked in over 40 states. I've worked in Congress. So it's an interesting path. It's one that I'm thankful for. And, I think I'd just start by talking about what is in the realm of political possibility. Here are some of the things that we've done in America throughout history as part of political possibility. One of the most outlandish and incredible things that's been done through public policy has been to outlaw the consumption of alcohol. And that was at a time when America had a much more serious drinking problem than it has now. You can look at the numbers, you can look at the culture, and eventually it was decided, and the people voted in a fair and square, open majority vote, and it was passed to the legislatures to absolutely ban the sale and, in some ways, the consumption of alcohol. That is an unbelievable thing that was accomplished. Now, I'm not saying that was a good idea. I don't think prohibition works. But it's crazy what you can do with the law when you work at it and when you are willing to organize and to work through getting it done. That's incredible. Something else that's incredible to people is to recognize that during Obama's 8 years, they did not pass on the federal level, did not succeed in passing one single gun control measure. Think about how unbelievable that is, especially in 2013, right after the Sandy Hook shooting in December of 2012, when he made it his top priority. That was what the president wanted, and they pushed hard, and they nearly won. We came within about 4 votes of passing that. And you have to remember that that was when Democrats controlled Congress. So, it's at least they controlled enough of it for it to be a serious threat. So those are some things that when everybody says, well, that's not possible. Well, is it possible tomorrow? No, nothing is politically possible. Very little is politically possible tomorrow. After doing this professionally for 20 years, I've been involved in it for more than 30. Possibility is kind of an absurd term. It really comes down to, are you willing to do the work? And are you able to maneuver the way you need to maneuver to pass legislation? It's kind of like making sausages. It's not a pleasant process. And that is often an excuse for bad behavior. Well, it's not a pleasant process, so we need to compromise and do all this take all these bad acts. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not proposing bad action, but I'm also saying that ultimately we have to be governed by the Word of God, and we can't invent additional requirements and then make them necessary for our activities. We have to be able to maneuver in the political sphere. Once you actually start doing it, then you have to be willing to actually do the work, which most people don't recognize as political, but that is called by many community organization. It's absolutely central. We call it grassroots mobilization or grassroots politics. You can't just do this with 100 people who agree with you on stuff. You have to have a larger number of people and get them to agree with you on the specific measure, not on the whole worldview, in order to get things done in politics. So those are some caveats. If you can do just about anything. Some of it that's been done in America has been really stupid, but you can do just about anything as long as you are willing to do the work.
So let's talk about, you talked about, which I think it was Brendan Boudreau was the first one that drew my attention. There's a documentary out there somewhere. I don't remember what it's called now. You probably know what it is, about how they were able to change the law regarding alcohol consumption. You remember what the name of it?
It's called Prohibition. It's by Ken Burns. It's a PBS documentary. It is a phenomenal look at how to pass a tremendously unpopular law and make it work, not only state by state, but then federally, and put it in the Constitution. I mean, there is not much more you can do in American politics than pass it in a majority of states, pass it in Congress, and then put it in the Constitution.
Yeah. I went through and watched that because I think it's on YouTube for free. And I watched it. It was great. It was a great documentary. About, if you look at it from the perspective of, I'm going to watch this documentary to help me understand how to change the law. Certainly, I don't agree with that particular move.
I disagree both with the concept of prohibition, and I disagree with the filmmaker's perspective. Ken Burns is an old school leftist, but he's honest for the most part. He's very honest in that documentary. I've checked it out. He's right. He did it. A guy named Wayne Wheeler is responsible for prohibition. One dude.
That was. So I encourage everybody to check out that documentary. Let's talk about a different piece of legislation along these same lines, though, because you talked about prohibition, but I want to talk about some of your experience in the gunfight, because a lot of the time that you've spent in political lobbying and sort of winning in the political realm is in regards to the Second Amendment. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because when you first started in politics, you told me about how showing up at the State House in overalls and stuff like that. Trying to figure out, you and I are pretty good friends. We've worked on a lot of things together. So that'll be the only embarrassing thing that I share. But
you have to work harder. That wasn't very embarrassing.
Yeah, right. But when you guys first started in politics, talk to us a little bit about the fight that you've been in regards to guns. What is the specific policy you're trying to pass? And then also, how popular has it been over the course from a populist standpoint? How popular has it been over the course of the time that you guys have been passing it in states?
Right. So I've spent the majority of my career working on constitutional carry. which simply says that if you are legally able to own a gun, you should be able to carry it for self-defense without another round of government permission. Now, I don't believe the government should be able to tell you whether or not you can own a gun either, except in very limited circumstances, felonies, that kind of thing. But constitutional carry focuses specifically on your ability to carry that firearm, openly or concealed. Now, when I first started working in politics in the 90s, there was one state that allowed its citizens to carry a firearm without getting a permit. That is the state of Vermont. We originally called this style of gun law a Vermont carry law. In 2003, Alaska passed it, just sort of out of the blue. It was an interesting situation. And then in 2009, we worked with a bunch of dudes in Arizona and got it passed there. In 2011, we went to Wyoming. A bunch of us were living in Colorado at the time, and northern Colorado. So went to Cheyenne, which is just across the border, and we worked to pass it there and got it done. After that, since then, that was 4 states that had it, 3 that passed it, 1 that had it already. Since that time to today, we're up to 21 if you count Texas, which passed the Senate yesterday in Texas. It does have some amendments which are troubling, so we're still looking at that. I'm not as deeply involved in it as the teams that I helped build, but now we've most likely passed it in 21 states. The governor, after much cajoling, I fought with Greg Abbott for nearly a decade over this question, and if we have finally punished him, literally punished him politically enough to where he is afraid not to sign this bill. So it's probably going to be 21. That's an amazing transformation because there was quite a few years there. There was a decade of working on it when no one would even touch it. We could not get anyone to even look at it. In its current form, the abolitionist movement hasn't even been in politics that long. In its current form, current with the 5 tenets and everything that you look at now. Back in 2003, I was involved with a state rep in South Dakota, where I grew up, and we actually passed a bill which banned abortion completely, no exceptions. It wasn't abolition in the sense that it followed the 5 tenets, but it was a direct challenge to Roe, and it did ban abortion outright, no exceptions. And we passed that in 2003. So, and it's been tried in other places in other states. So certainly the concept of banning abortion has existed since pre-Roe. But in its current form and the current people who are working on it, we haven't even been doing this for a decade yet. And that's the first thing to remember. This is a larger fight than constitutional carry, partially because of the size of the issue, but also largely because you have a very well-funded industry as an opponent. There is no anti-gun industry. There's an anti-gun lobby, and they have industrialized it in the sense that they make money doing it, but no one pays them money for a service or a good. In this case, abortion is a paid service, and there is a lot of money just off the streets, and then you've got the government funding. So that's a reality that has to be faced. So, but it took us a decade to even get off the ground, have anyone even take it seriously. And the way we did that is by continuing to build the grassroots support among people who said, yeah, you know what? We do have a Second Amendment. We should be able to carry a gun without begging government for permission, for Pete's sake. But the reality is there are a lot of conservative gun owners who said, man, you just want criminals to carry guns. We don't support that. They would privately come and say, well, it's a good idea, but we don't want to be anywhere near that public. And of course, the NRA, we joke lovingly, not so lovingly, refer to them as the No Rifles Association, was openly opposing our legislation everywhere. They would come into our states, and they came into Arizona and Wyoming and Alaska and opposed constitutional carry. And we punished them for that. We were careful not to attack them unless they were actually actively doing bad things, because that doesn't win any support among our grassroots members. That's something to pay attention to. But we worked at that for a decade by building a grassroots army. And eventually, then we got to the point to where we could win elections because we had people who would say, yeah, that's right. We should be able to carry a firearm without begging government for permission. And it wasn't just nebulous. We had names, we had addresses, we had email addresses once that became a thing, and they would donate money. small dollar donations. So when I went to work for the National Association for Gun Rights in 2011, I went from working a state level group, and NAGR grew out of a bunch of these state level groups, and we went national. When I first started there, we had 750,000 members. 3 years later, we had 4.5 million members. So you can do this, you can build it, but it takes focus on finding the people who agree with us on the issue and getting them involved, and not throwing a bunch of stumbling blocks in the way. Not trying to make them, well, you can't say, we didn't go around and say, well, the NRA says they're pro-gun. We're not pro-gun. We're whatever. We'll come up with a new term. We'll invent it. And that's something that I do. I know it's controversial. I realize that I have many brothers who feel very strongly about this issue. I respect and love my brothers who do. And I'm here to tell you that having done this for 20 years, we have actually gone in and passed controversial legislation, not in one state, but in 21. South Carolina is on the verge of passing it. Louisiana is on the verge of passing it. We are going to have half the states in the union soon. And there will be, within the next 4 to 5 years, 40 states will pass this bill. It's the way it goes. You will see that happen. The liberal states will not touch it. But every state who has conservative voters will pass this, because they now perceive this to be the litmus test for whether or not it's pro-gun. I am privileged to have worked in that movement since the beginning, when very few other people were. I'm privileged to have built the team that is still passing this legislation, and to have built this into a movement. Now, I'm not saying that constitutional carry is either, number one, as important as banning abortion. The right to keep and bear arms flows from the right to life. You have a right to carry a gun to defend yourself because you have a right to life. Government policy, which restricts your ability to carry a firearm, threatens your life, but it doesn't actually just let someone kill you. That's what abortion does. So I'm not comparing it on an importance scale. I am also recognizing that it is much more difficult to pass an absolute ban on abortion. It is much more difficult to abolish than it is to repeal the restrictions on carrying. Okay, I recognize that as well. But that said, it's the same process. And it's not about what the politicians think. It's about gathering together enough grassroots supporters who will help fund your operation and turn out to vote, to demonstrate to the politicians that if you do not behave in accordance with us, we will punish you, politically speaking. So this is exactly what Prohibition was. Just FYI, that's how they passed it. They did exactly this. So that's how you do it.
So on that note, one of the big misconceptions in regards to working in the political realm is the idea that you got to change the hearts and minds of the people. If we ever want to accomplish anything in politics, we have to change. This is George Bush, right? George Bush is elected to office. What was it, 2000? He's run on this big pro-life platform, and then for 4 years he didn't do anything for the preborn, even according to the pro-life do nothing standard. He got elected again, and people were asking him why he wasn't doing anything for the preborn, and his answer, of course, was, "Well, that's your fault. It's the problem with the churches and the pro-life."
What he said is, you need to build a culture of life before we can pass any legislation. So this is the most powerful man in the world, telling his constituents that, well, you people haven't done your jobs yet. You have to do your jobs before I can do mine. Yeah. And what he was saying is, you have to change hearts and minds. It's an absolute red herring. And this is where we need to get down to recognizing that if we say it is our goal to pass a law banning abortion outright, it is our goal to abolish abortion using law, and then we go out to wage a cultural war, we really actually don't care about passing a bill. It's not about whether or not we're going to pass the bill. It's whether or not we're going to use the bill to educate the populace. Okay? So if that's our goal, then let's be honest and let's acknowledge that it's actually not our goal, at least not within the next, 30, 40 years, to pass a law. It is our goal to change how the culture thinks. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that changing culture is a bad thing. I actually believe that the gospel does change culture, and that preaching the gospel is culture changing. That is the blessing of the gospel. But that is different from saying it is my goal to change the law. Now, if the culture changes, will that change the law? Well, it makes it possible. It does not change the law. Just because a culture thinks something doesn't make it law. Right now, 70% of the American populace believes that assault weapons should be banned. That is still the number right now today. We do not need to change hearts and minds. If you are in the anti-gun side, if you believe you should ban assault weapons, you don't need to change the culture. It's already there. What's the one issue that conservatives continue winning to this very moment? It's on the assault weapons ban. That ban is dead on arrival in Congress every time. Why? Because gun owners have demonstrated that we will defeat you faster than the anti-gun side. Bloomberg can't save you. We will own you, and you will no longer be in office, period. Okay? So changing the culture is not directly related to changing the law. Even if you have cultural support, then you have to go do all the work you'd have to already do. You have to organize, you have to mobilize, you have to communicate it, you have to win some elections, and then you have to actually do the work of winning votes in Congress or in the legislative body. Yeah. These two things are not directly connected. Look at minimum wage. Raising the minimum wage is wildly popular in America. A $15 minimum wage wins in the polls every time. Why do we not already have it? Why didn't we have it under Obama? Why are they having trouble getting it under Biden? Why has Congress not passed it yet? Because those who do not want to raise the minimum wage are more politically effective than those who want to raise it, and they are in the dramatic minority. So we need to be careful with our terminology, first of all, for those who want to change the culture. We need to be honest about change the culture and not actually being in politics. We're not in politics. We're in culture ministry. And again, that's not a bad thing. But if we're going to change the law, no, we need to mobilize. We already have more than enough people in America. Many of them refer to themselves as pro-life because in their mind, that means I'm against abortion. That's what they think. And many of them simply do not know that it is possible to actually ban it. Yeah. They don't think that's possible. Now we're demonstrating otherwise, and we're demonstrating again and again and again that people turn out to ban abortion. What we haven't done yet is defeat someone for voting against a bill of abolition. That has not yet been done. And until that is done, until we defeat enough people in one jurisdiction to convince the political structure there in one state that the right to life cannot defend you, and Planned Parenthood cannot hurt you as bad as we can, politically speaking. Once that is demonstrated, you will start to see amazing things happening. And I'm under no delusions that, oh, great, that'll just be it. No, you have to pass it, and then you have to enforce it. You have to have a governor, you have to have an attorney general, you have to actually make it work. But how do you get there? Introduce the legislation and make sure that the people who vote against it suffer the political consequences. In other words, it's harder for them to be reelected or they lose.
Yeah. Okay, so what I want to do here, we're coming up on 27 minutes, so usually we like to take a break for street ministry, kind of right in the middle. So what I want to do is take a quick break. We're going to go out and do our street ministry segment, and then we'll come back. And when we come back, we'll talk more in detail about some of the process that there's probably a lot of people that are listening right now that are thinking, okay, this is all well and good, so I don't need to change the hearts and minds of 50% plus one of the people that live in America in order to make abortion illegal. So what do I need to do, and what does that actually look like? So we're demonstrating, I think, over the course of this conversation that changing the law to make abortion, to abolish abortion in America is not impossible. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that and talk about why. And I'm sure Callie's probably got some questions he wants to jump in here with as well. So let's take a quick break and run on to the ministry segment, and we'll come right
back. So I'm James Silverman. I'm an abolitionist with Free the States. And a few years ago, I was doing outreach and evangelism in Columbus, Ohio. And I was, it was a conversation about abortion, but then, obviously I try to, as much as possible, take the conversation to Christianity and the gospel. And I got talking to this guy on the gospel, and he was smart. Like he was an atheist. He went to college for I think astrology, and so he was talking about the expansions and contractions of the universe. And I'm just like, man, I don't know what to say to this guy. Like I don't know how to defend God's word in this situation. Because I just feel like he knows more than me about the subjects that he wants to take the conversation to, and all I can tell him is, hey, can I have your email? I'll go search the internet for something email to respond, and it just felt like I wasn't just really discouraged by it. And a little bit later that day, I went over and was doing evangelism by my friend Sam Riley, and he was talking also to a very smart atheist. But somehow he would just always just draw it right back to the gospel, and I was like, man, teach me how to do that. And I don't know what you're doing there, but show me how to do that. And so yeah, we were roommates at the time, so we got home, and he handed me an 800-page book and said, go read this. It was Van Til's Apologetic by Greg Bonson. And so I read all that and just ate it up. And then we watched some of the Jeff Durbin, I think the Reason Rally videos where he's pre-supping a bunch of atheists at an atheist event. And yeah, it really revolutionized the way I evangelize. But it also changes the way you address abortion too, because it trains you to get right to the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue isn't the person needs, they need more evidence to become a Christian, or they need more evidence to know that life begins at conception. They know these things. You gotta get to the issue, which is sin and suppression of the truth. And so yeah, that really just revolutionized the way that I share the gospel, the way that I defend the faith, the way that I refute pro-abortion talking points, and the way that I fight abortion, and I'm going to be fighting to abolish it for a long time.
We are Titus 2 women, seeking to glorify God through the teaching of younger women, biblically, to love their husbands, children, and be keepers of the home.
Not grudgingly or as a legalistic chore, but rather to joyfully sacrifice in loving their husband and children as unto the Lord.
Giving glory to God and finding joy in caring for our families in only the way wives and mothers can.
As God has blessed us with female traits that make our work in the home essential to a godly home.
All right, so we're back from the street ministry segment. I want to just take this opportunity to plug that segment. If you're a listener of our podcast and you're out doing ministry in the streets, you're preaching the gospel, you're whether it's at sporting events or abortion clinics or wherever else you might be, you're passing out tracts or flyers, we just want to invite you to send us a 3 to 5 minute video that shares a story of some time that you were out in the streets doing gospel ministry. And then if you're listening right now and you're not involved in bringing the gospel to the streets, we should encourage you to get involved in that. And if you need some help or you need some pointers and some resources to get started, reach out to Pastor Callie or I, and we will we'll dig in and get you some resources and help you get started. So I think we laid a good foundation for our discussion in the first segment here. I do have a few more questions, but Callie, I wanted to let you see if you had any questions you want to jump in here with, or any thoughts you want to jump in here with before I start. Yeah.
All right. So first, I think it was very helpful the way you explained how the Constitution and the compromises that we've made in the Bill of Rights or any of these other amendments, how they're not absolute, right? That there is a one definition for what they are intended to do, but also that they are not set in stone and cannot be changed, regardless of how difficult that process is.
Sure.
Whether you're talking about local, state, federal, even down to the actual law of the land, right? The Constitution and such, that they are not absolute and they can be changed, and the work that needs to go into making that a reality. So I thought that was really helpful. The other thing that I think is also really helpful, this distinction that you made between goals. Is the goal to pass just legislation of equal justice, or is it to change hearts and minds, shift the paradigm, whatever phrasing that you want to use with that aspect. And I think that's an important one that we don't talk about a lot. And I think that we should, because from my perspective, it would be the latter. Right. I think that when we talk about abortion, we're super myopic, and we have a tendency of talking about two things in particular. One, going out to abortion clinics, preaching the gospel, offering assistance, and pregnancy center things in conjunction with that. The other way, that if you ask Christians what they can do about abortion, it has to deal with legislation. Voting a specific way, emailing, calling, talking to your representative or your legislator, or whatever thing that happens to be. Understanding how the law works and how we're being misled as sovereign states under the federal government, or whatever thing that you want to help people think about. So I think those two aspects, whether it's the legal aspect or the abortion clinic aspect, they get so much of the airtime, as it were, in our conversations, in our discussions. And I think that's unfortunate, because for me, it is not those things. I think that they're important. And I think that if we are consistent in our theology, it should affect how we are as a citizen or a legislator, or how we engage in politics. So I would involve myself with that grassroots idea that you're talking about, and push for just legislation in the long term, in being part of that base that hurts the legislator for doing the wrong thing. I think that is absolutely correct. And I'm grateful for, things like Free the States, where that is their focus. That is the thing that they are trying to do. But I don't think that is the telos or purpose of what we are to do. Does that make sense? And so we need people like you that have that focus. But I am glad that you recognize that there's a distinction between these goals. And you're right, we need to be honest with what our goal is. And sometimes there's an overlap, and that's good. But we need to be clear about what our purpose is, and the steps that we take, do they line up with that purpose? Right.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate you bringing this up, because I certainly agree that our central calling as human beings in this world is not just to change the law or to be
Right.
politically active, right?
Right.
So when we talk about what is the purpose of man, well, I appreciate the Westminster Standards. What is the chief end of man? To enjoy God and glorify Him forever. That's a lot bigger than political involvement. Okay. However, it includes political involvement in the same way that it includes being a father, in the same way that or being part of whatever role you are in a family. It includes being a member of your church community, not just to attend church. It means being part of the community of Christ. It means being involved in whatever business God calls a person to be involved in. It means relating to the arts in one way or another. It means ministering to those in need. It is all of life.
Right.
And so, yes, without a doubt, without a question, what is the chief end of man? To enjoy God and glorify Him forever. Many different ways of saying that, many different professions, and they often agree. My Reformed Baptist brothers have a different way of saying it, and it's the same thing. So certainly, yes. I think that the point I'm making here is that when we want to talk about ending abortion,
Mhm.
we're not really talking about abortion mill ministry. That doesn't end abortion.
No,
That
100% agree.
stops, that saves babies. And what a tremendous, I mean, it takes its toll, as you both know very well. But what a tremendous opportunity to be the salt and light in the culture, in the same way that the first century Christians were saving the babies that were cast out in their own blood and
Mhm.
gore and
Mhm.
exposed to die, taking them in, starting orphanages. This is part of the work of the church,
Mhm.
not just the institution, but the community of the ecclesia. So that is that's a huge part of it, but that's not actually abolishing abortion, right?
Correct.
Um,
Right.
Preaching the gospel, whether it be on the street corner or
Mhm.
in a podcast or in
Mhm.
church, is
Right.
obviously part of our calling as Christians. But
Mhm.
that also, respectfully, is not actually abolishing abortion. It may be an
Right.
effort to make as an antecedent to, right?
Right.
We could talk about anything, ministries to moms who've been damaged by abortion, everything.
Right.
That's all part of our Christian existence. But I submit there is only one thing that's actually abolishing abortion: passing a law and then enforcing that law.
Right.
That is abolishing abortion. And so that in this context, so I think you and I are in agreement there, and I really appreciate you
Mhm.
bringing that up for clarity, because in that context, that's where I'm suggesting that if our goal is to change the culture so that we can change the law, we're actually not doing it.
Right. Right.
We need to
Right. And
change the
I'm not
law.
saying, yeah, I'm not saying that we need to change the law in order to change the minds of the people. I'm not saying that, but I do recognize that the law teaches people within the
Right.
boundaries of an authority what's morally acceptable and what's not morally acceptable. I mean, that's a given. But what I'm not saying is that we need to change the law in order to change the minds of the people. Nor am I saying
Right.
that we need to change the minds of more people and that will change the law.
Right.
I'm not
We
saying that
agree
at
there.
all either.
Both.
Um,
They're not the
right.
same. They're disconnected, right? That's what you're saying.
Right, right. And
They
I
certainly
do agree
influence, as you
that
said, overlapping influence. But
right. I agree that there is a few number of people that are necessary to make the greatest impact that will change the law, right? So all I'm saying is that I think my purpose in doing the things that I do, even with the legislature and going out to the Capitol, um, it is in support of equal justice, exposing when justice is not being done by any given legislator, any given organization, or any given individual. Because the more I talk to just the average voter, those dudes are like hoodwinked by all of these lobbyists, by all of their legislators. They actually really believe that the legislators are doing something that they're not doing. And they're completely surprised when I send them video of their legislator saying the thing I'm saying that the legislator is saying, which is
right.
the opposite of what they believe that the legislator is doing. Right. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is also an important role just in this sharing of what truth is, right? So, do I want bills of equal justice to be passed and enforced? Yes, and I want to support people that can make that done, whether it's financially, going out, handing out tracts or information or whatever. Yes, is that my goal? Is that my end goal? No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference between, say, something like abortion, which is the unjust killing of a human, and, say, sex trafficking. Okay, they're both evil. We should fight against both of them. But what's the big distinguishing difference between the two? One is sanctioned by the government and the other one's not. Right. So there's a certain
Right.
injustice that's being done on one end that needs the attention that the other one doesn't need, while both of them need to be addressed. And
Mhm.
so, yes, I do want bills of equal justice. I want to support them, but that is not my goal.
Right.
And I think that what you've been saying has been really helpful for other people that are like me that say that, because I've been saying that. I've been saying that for years, and the way that you've explained it, I think, is really helpful. You know.
Praise God.
So speaking to what you're talking about there, Callie, too, when you talk about one of the things you brought up actually here that actually overlaps with both, I think, what you're trying to accomplish and changing the law. When you talk about telling voters the way that their legislators are actually behaving, right?
Right.
When you're
Right.
talking about political tactics,
Right.
that's one of those things that I think actually both. So in the fight to end abortion, you talk about the two aspects of what we're doing. There's the immediate: we're going to the mill, we're trying to save babies, we're preaching in the streets, we're doing some of the things you're talking about, Callie. We're sending videos to people saying, "Hey, here's the way your legislators are behaving," and so forth. And then there's the political aspect of the fight. One of the places that overlaps when it comes to prophetic ministry and political ministry is being honest with the populace about the way the politicians are behaving.
Hmm.
There's an
Hmm.
overlap there. Like that's
Right.
something that both sides are
Right.
doing,
Right.
and both sides want to do. It's a big part of what victory looks like. I think for both sides, both sides. When I say both sides, I'm not talking about two different sides of an argument. I'm talking about the two different aspects of what we tend to
Yeah.
do.
Two callings,
Um,
maybe. Both callings.
yeah,
Hmm.
right. Maybe you call it that. Yeah. So here's my question. Going forward from here, going back to the political realm, because I think that discussion that just happened is going to be tremendously helpful to people that are listening
Hmm.
about the two different callings, so to speak, both being valuable, um, but also both having their own lane, so to speak, and then recognizing where they overlap and how to overlap with one another.
Hmm.
But when we're talking in terms of politics, I think one big question people might have, is you're talking about, like, you've talked a lot, for example, about like grassroots mobilization. How do you, like, there's a guy like Callie, who would say, I want to end abortion. I want to pass a bill of equal justice. I'm in support of that goal. It's not my big goal. It's not my main goal, but it is pursuant to my main goal, so to speak. It's in
Hmm.
alignment with my big goal. When you're talking about grassroots activism and things like that, you got guys like Callie, you got your pro-lifer down the road who thinks that the guy he talked about earlier, who thinks that they're
Hmm.
trying to end abortion, really wants to end abortion, doesn't recognize they're ending abortion, and then you got, maybe your low level person involved in some pro-life organization. You got all these different people that want to end abortion. And one of the things you're trying to do as a political activist is build grassroots support, right? In other words, you're trying to pull all these people together and point them in a direction and say, here's what we need to do,
Hmm.
right? In the political realm, specifically in the political realm. This is what
Hmm.
we need to do. So you've talked a lot about building grassroots support over the course of this discussion. So I think one big question people may have if they're interested in changing the law is, tangibly, can you give us some idea, like, what does that actually look like? What does it look like to
Sure.
actually do that in an
Right.
effective way that makes a difference?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to be clear. The reason I believe it's important to have the discussion over tactics and goals is because that is what is going to determine whether or not you're going to accomplish it. So if the question is, well, can you actually do this, right? Because we're answering the objection, this is not possible. Well, then we
Hmm.
have to understand it is possible, but only if you do it right. If you don't do it right, if you don't actually pursue the goal
Hmm.
and do what works within what God commands and allows, then
Hmm.
no, it's not possible. It's not. So I think that's a very important discussion. So now when we talk about how do we get enough people going in the same direction to change the law, because that is the context here. I want to be clear that when we refer to the callings, they do overlap. There are many ways in which I'm going to call it the political calling or the law and public policy calling and the prophetic or ministry calling. These are two interconnected callings on Christians. And now we're talking about, what has God called me to do, right? Both
Hmm.
are acceptable, both are within the law of God, both are commanded. But what am I called to spend the majority of my time on? Because I go down to the mills and I
Hmm.
minister. I'm involved with my church. I educate my children, right? And so Everyone is going to have some element, and those who are called to, but I'm not in the ministry. Um, those who are in the ministry, they're going to vote. They're going to have an opinion in politics. They're going to talk to politicians. Possibly they're going to do some of these things which are inherently political. And so when we start talking about, okay, how do the callings interact? Well, there's one way. The prophetic calling has a political aspect in which you are going to go down and minister to the magistrate sometimes, right? That's something that is part of this picture. But is it your goal to change the way they vote primarily, or is it your goal to bring them the word of God so that perhaps God will show mercy and they will repent, right?
Yep.
That is the primary goal of ministry. My primary goal in politics, I want to change how they vote. If God blesses them with repentance through that, praise God. But that is not actually my goal with them. My goal is to get them to vote differently, to force them, if necessary, to change their vote using government by the consent of the governed, the classic underpinnings of American governance. And so I think that's an important, just one example of the way these two callings, you're going to do very similar things. I'm here talking to politicians. You're there talking to politicians, but it's actually two different outcomes which are connected but not the same. And so that then leads to this differentiation in a ministry, especially a prophetic ministry. The goal is to show the difference. It is differentness, not sameness. And everything is shaped around this, what you're doing, it's wrong, you should do this. To show one time when a prophet went to the king in the nation of Israel, and the king was like, "Welcome, buddy, I'm so glad you're here." No, it was an adversarial relationship because the prophet was there to say, not sameness, difference. There is a problem. You are doing it wrong. Now, in that way, in politics, it usually ends up being the same because we are not there to have sameness with the politicians. We're there to tell them we want something and it's not what you're giving us. Something needs to change. If they were doing what we wanted already, we'd be working on something else, right? We're not there to work on that issue. So in that case, it's the same. But then when we're talking about prophecy or the prophetic ministry to individuals who are not in office, this is where it does get different, I believe. The prophetic ministry, we're on the street or we're talking to an individual or we're in a church or whatever it is. We're still here to say, repent, do this differently. This is not. Whereas politically, we're actually looking for who are people who are already interested in doing this right. And all we have to do is get them to make a very small change. We only want them to change from saying, I don't know if it's possible to ban abortion, but I think it's right, to I think it's right and we're going to do it. That's all we're actually looking for. And the reality in America in this issue, we have more than enough people already who believe that abortion is an absolute abomination, who are absolutely opposed to it. In all cases, rape, incest, you name it, it's wrong. And they are right now doing everything they possibly can to see it end, which for many of them includes a bad incremental approach, which many of them includes something that leads to the wrong thing because that's what they think is necessary. They're being lied to. They're fooling themselves, whatever it may be. And we're trying to make a small change. So ultimately, we're looking for sameness in politics with many people. And so, Darren, your question is, how do you get a large number of people to go the right direction? You look for connection points and you pull those people in and then give them the activity that says, hey, call this guy, he's your representative today, he's going to vote on the bill, here's his phone number, and here's the message, please, in South Carolina, please support H4046, or please support Jonathan Hill's budget amendment to fully defund Planned Parenthood or all abortion providers or whatever it may be. That's where we're making a small difference, and so a small change in their behavior. And I think that is something that we both have to give grace to one another. We have to, because after we finished the rally, I just came back from organized a rally in South Carolina. It was on Tuesday. God brought 450 people to the Capitol, absolutely packed it out. The politicians didn't know what to do with it all. We sang, we preached, we were active, we left messages, and then God blessed the street preachers. They stood up and started preaching. And that's when DPS was like, okay, you guys are being noisy. You got to stop. And I said, well, okay, I'll tell them, but I'm not going to stop them. You guys need to hear this. Guess what? They all went and hid in a room. They decided they really didn't want that showdown. And the preachers preached. And praise God for that. So that's where there were two things going on. And some of the same people were doing both. And that's okay. That's a good thing. But we have to look at it that way. Now, specifically, how do you organize people? first of all, you stop looking for people who disagree with you, and you start looking for people who agree. And that's what I mean by
Mhm.
sameness. I'm not looking for the people who disagree. I'm not looking for the abortive moms. They're not going to help. I'm looking for the people who already think abortion is bad, it's wrong, and especially the ones who think that there should be no exceptions. If they believe there should be no exceptions, I'm pretty sure we can win them over on whether or not we should defy Roe.
Right.
Most of them are like, well, yeah, can we? Is that possible? And they're like, well, yeah, we're doing it in 33 states on marijuana, and that's a stupid issue. We should do it on abortion. Wow, good idea.
Yeah, I think you've touched on something that I think is really important, and I think it's a really good strategy, especially when we're talking about hurting the politician that is going in opposition of where we want them to go, right?
And to be clear, I'm
Either
sorry to
they're
interrupt here. We just have to say when we say hurt, we mean politically. And I know you mean this too. We didn't have to use to
yes,
clarify that. Unfortunately,
right.
after January 6th, we are all like, no, for Pete's sake. No, we're talking about unelecting them. That's it.
Right. Yeah. When I say that, I mean make them lose their job because you've
Exactly.
gotten the people in their district so mad at them for not doing this thing that, you take 50 people that change their vote and he's now lost his job. Right. That's what I'm talking about. So that takes talking to people in their districts. That takes going, hey, you say this. You actually agree with me, which is this sameness that you're talking about, right? You agree with the Christian position on this. Yes, I do. Your representative says he agrees. Yes, he does.
Yes.
Here's what he said during the hearing.
Here's how he voted.
Here's how he voted. Here's how
Exactly.
he talked about it. Here is how he came in opposition to the bill that does it. Whatever his reasons are, you can deal with that with your constituents. You did it, right? So now it becomes, an abolitionist might not beat the incumbent guy that does that, but he can swing enough votes to make him lose, and another person comes in. That's still a victory for the abolitionist movement because it shows that they have the power, if you will, the influence to swing a vote away from an 8-year incumbent that has the governor behind them, right? Even if their figurehead person that they put up doesn't win, who cares, right? They swung the election based off of that one issue. So those are the things that are helping. Because you're right. We don't need 51% of the population to pass a thing. We don't need 51% of the legislator to pass a thing.
3%.
Right. You need to get the leadership in particular of any caucus or anything to recognize the power that you have to unseat people that they want in. And I think that is, so how do you put that hurt or how do you unseat a representative? You talk to the people, right? And so, and again, this is where we're talking about this overlap of, hey, person, let me show you why this thing is evil, right? Because we have to do that. We have to go, hey, the thing he's doing is evil. Here is why. And I think that's part of that sameness that you're talking about, but at the same time, it's the showing the stark differentness between this overarching thing that the politician is running on and throwing cover on, going, hey, look, I'm doing this thing. We need to uncover that and show that the emperor has no clothes, that these are all lies that they're telling you. They are intentionally misleading you on what they are doing. And I think there's a way to do it with their own words, so it's not being slanderous, right? And one of the, for example, one of the things that I've been pushing for the past year is anytime a pro-life legislator says something stupid like abortion is not health care, because they like to play to their
Right.
base. Oh, of course it's not health care, it's murder. I go and call them out for creating healthcare laws that define the lawful medical procedure that has the intended result of the death of the child. Show them by their words and their works that they are actually treating it like health care. It's health care because of them,
Yeah.
and force them to either change their language, their tactics, or just expose the reality of what's being done, rather than using these pithy little slogans and sayings and rhetoric that are their lies.
Right, and that's you're absolutely right. I think that when the question I think you're asking and that you said was how do we put the hurt on them, right? How do
Right.
we defeat them?
Right.
How do we? And that's the fun thing. The fun thing. The reason I don't say just defeat is it's anything that leads to defeat. We
Right.
passed constitutional carry in Mississippi, for example. We ran 20 candidates and we only won 5 of them. And our primary guy, the guy who was the committee chair who killed our bill, we didn't beat him. He beat our candidate badly. There were some mistakes made, and that's just the reality of political. Sometimes your opponents beat you. But we caused them so much pain in the process, political pain. That means they had to go work hard to get reelected. They had to put up with angry constituents. They had to do the work in a district they thought they were safe in. This dude, this committee chair, won 70-30, I think it was, pounded our candidate. And he got up the next day, and his victory lap in the newspaper was, "This is so hard. I'm not going to run for office again if it's this hard." Totally entitled. He thinks he's got a divine right from God to represent that district. And when that happened, I turned to my team and said, "You guys just did it. That dude does not have the stomach for another cycle of this, even if he wins."
Right.
And that's an important nuance. You don't necessarily have to run a candidate that's 100% right in order to get involved. So let's say you only got 2 candidates. You've got the incumbent who's voted wrong on abortion, and you've got the opponent who has no record but isn't saying I'm an abolitionist, isn't even being correct. Well, you don't have to support the challenger in order to defeat the incumbent.
Right.
All you have to do is go after the incumbent. Let the chips fall where they may. If the dude you didn't endorse wins, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. You defeated somebody and you demonstrated, I will put the hurt on you. I will put political hurt on you, and that's what will cause political pain. And the dude who gets elected is going to sit up and take notice. I've done that in races where they didn't agree with me, but I just ignored them and went after their opponent. And you have to do so in a way that's effective. And that's where that's where you get into this difference between differentness and sameness. And I'm trying to come up with a better term of that. But you are showing a contrast between this is what the politician says he is, and this is what he really is. Okay, and that's where you're right. It is all contrast. It is all opposition. It's head-to-head war, right? But then with the people who we don't get to decide, we have to convince at least a plurality, if not a majority, of voters that the incumbent needs to leave. That's where we're reaching out. That's where we're building bridges. That's where we're trying to say, hey, there is a majority of sameness here. You can trust me. We're the same on a deep level. We believe that abortion is wrong. He doesn't. He's lying. And that's the picture. So that's how you do that. And it's so very important. We have to get to that point to where we recognize we're going to have the help of some pro-lifers, some pro-life voters who will never get abolition. They'll never understand it. End of the day, God will open the door for some of them. The campaigns that we run will enable us to talk about it more than before. God will change some hearts and minds. We'll get to be involved in that. But there will be people who will have to vote the way we want them to vote, at least against the incumbent, who will never get it. So how do we talk to them? Because they actually support abolition. They just don't know. They don't understand the concept, and they may never understand the tenets, the terminology, the heart of what we're doing. But they'll still support ending abortion outright. You just have to explain it to them.
Well, I mean, that's like the Dan Fisher campaign, right? So you have him running for governor in Oklahoma.
Right.
Came in third. Got 10,000 votes. Okay. But what happened during that campaign? he forced the conversation to come to the public, right? So is there benefit in doing that, where it brings out this conversation to show the sameness and the contrast within the candidates, whether they're governors or senators or House of Representative people? By running a campaign, you bring the conversation to the public through the media, right? That when you've got something like that happening, the media has to talk about it, right? Which gets it to all of the homes. So now you have a bunch of people going, what's the difference here? And the next thing you know, you have 5,000 people at the Capitol booing pro-life legislation that are just regular pro-life people, right? So a lot of them still don't get the fullness of the distinction, but they recognize that these yahoos are doing something shady. Right, right.
They're lying to us. Yeah. And that's what really motivates them. So I actually agree with you, but I think there are two things that are more important. I've actually told Dan this, and we're friends. I respect him. We've worked in some of the same circles. And I'm not sure he disagrees, but what you're mentioning is the opportunity to bring the issue to the forefront. And that does happen, and it can be a very good thing. But there are two things that are even more important that have to be done in order to actually make that a reality, more than just a flash in the pan. We talked about it, now it's gone. Campaigns that do these two things and lose are still highly successful campaigns. Campaigns which fail to do these things and win are unsuccessful campaigns, in my opinion. These two things are, number one, build the grassroots support around the concept, which usually includes building it around the candidate. That means building lists of donors, building lists of supporters, and actually raising those resources so that the next time you want to work on this issue, you've got names and phone numbers and addresses of people who are known donors to people who support this. And whether it's Dan Fisher running again in this example or someone he supports, that list can be accessed and utilized. And the second thing is identifying lists of voters who will vote based on this issue, and not just they turned up, which is good. It's good to have them turn up the Capitol. But we have we have a joke among those of us who do this for a living. If you hold a rally and you don't have a list of the people who attended afterward, it's kind of like the tree that fell in the forest that nobody heard. Did it actually even happen? So if you have a list of the people who were there and you have their contact info, so that the next time you want to hold this rally, you can contact them and tell them, hey, we're doing it again. Or the next time you got the bill, call your rep. So those two things, they are the physical manifestation of what you're talking about. But our problem is that we usually, I'll run and we'll get media and people will talk about it. It'll be splashy. And, but all that does is that ends up making the candidate a celebrity. And when they get done, people know who they are, but we can't talk to them again without having some big splash. And it's just this little cycle instead of it being forward motion. So not to disagree with you, but just to develop on that theme.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Well, this has been a great discussion. I'd love to keep it going. Callie, do you have any other questions before I?
No, I think what he's saying is really good. I mean, that's kind of what the Abolish Abortion Texas guys did with Jeremiah's Wish, right? They used that.
It's exactly what we did
to pull in 70,000 growing, 80,000 contacts, emails, phone numbers, and then what happened? We had 8 hours of testimony from non-abolitionists. For HB 896, right?
And we did it again. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So by creating these lists and expanding on them, you do you have access to the people that you're trying to reach, and a lot of them, like you said, are going to be on the fence or not, on the wrong side of the fence, but they just don't realize it yet, right? So then it's just a matter of going, hey, I notice you keep saying this thing, but let me show you the truth about that. And then, oh, okay, well, let me show you the truth about this other thing. And, you know, because fundamentally they agree with what you're saying. Yes. In their gut, they know that it is the thing to do.
Right.
then
My,
it's just a matter of like removing the stumbling blocks that the other people have put in their face, you know.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to step off
absolutely.
screen here. I have to plug my computer in.
That happens.
It's trying to die on us right now. No, Callie, you're absolutely right. And I'm pleased to say that the AATX guys, Bradley Pierce is one of my oldest friends in politics. He's a dear brother, and he has been practicing this brand that I'm talking about here faithfully
Hmm.
since he came to me and I told him you need to start a group, and he started it, and he has been just like a bulldog after these tactics. That's why Texas is one of the most successful states in actually getting hearings, getting things forward motion. They've now defeated numerous candidates who have opposed the issue. They're
Hmm.
making progress like nowhere else because of that focus, and they
Yeah.
refuse to, number one, focus on changing culture. Changing culture is important, but that's not their mission. Their mission is to change law, and it's not changing
Right.
culture is not antecedent to changing law. And then they also focus on organization over media. Media, again,
Right.
is valuable. It has some value, but only if it leads to organization. And
Right.
so prioritizing changing the law via organization, that's where it's at. And AATX is the
Yeah.
poster child for that.
So I'm friends with them, right? And
I know you are.
I'm in Texas, right? So we
Yeah.
talk, and I am able as an individual to do things that they as an organization cannot do. It would be
Right.
detrimental
Right.
to the movement forward of what they are trying to accomplish.
Right.
I'm not bound by those things, so I can
Mhm.
say and do specific things that they have to be distanced from, and I get that, right? And at the
Mhm.
same time, there are times where I'm like, hey, I've got this thing. Is this going to hurt you too much if I do this thing, or should I hold off for a little bit, right?
Right.
And respecting their goals and stuff,
Mhm.
and what they are trying to accomplish, because I do support them.
Right. Yeah.
The things that they are doing, I
Right.
support, and I don't
Right.
want to do something that could jeopardize that if the timing is incorrect, right? You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
and I honestly I do feel bad for those guys sometimes, because I know when I post certain things, or specific drawings, that I know that their phones go off, and it's like, hey, your guy is doing this thing again, hey,
Right.
like,
Well, that's where, making the politicians and the political class uncomfortable usually is a good thing. Um,
yeah.
so, and, Bradley keeps me in the loop when they're actually in my political, I work politics for a living. Bradley is one of my clients. So a lot of the communications you see there coming out of my shop.
Mhm.
And I'm
Okay,
super
so
excited to work
I
with him.
apologize for
No, no, no. The reason I'm saying that is because Bradley keeps me in the loop because he's one of my clients. I'm his vendor
yeah, yeah,
on, conversations and what's going on. And I can't tell you, Callie, how much it means to have you, the respect that you show for changing the law. And at the same time, want
right,
you to know from our perspective, as Bradley, I'm sure has told you, gig them again, do it again, make them squeal,
right,
do
right.
it again.
And
So
I think
absolutely.
that working in conjunction together, it is what's beneficial, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, well, and that being going to them and saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing, but should I wait?" Or, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that you're giving them a head.
Timing.
That's
right,
Yeah.
huge.
Timing is huge. It's usually more
right,
Initial,
important than
big,
content.
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
big thing.
we've got 3 weeks left in this session, so
Right.
that's
Okay.
Well,
Be done in
so,
3
so
weeks.
so all right, so next month, y'all,
yeah, right. Look out.
get ready.
Allie's taking the leash off.
Piling
Yeah.
the ideas have been piling up. So, what I want to do as we wrap this up here, one of the questions is probably people are itching to know the answer to. We're not going to talk about on this episode, so I'm going to kind of whet their appetite a little bit. But one of the questions they're probably itching to answer is, okay, I'm interested in this, punishing politicians when they don't do what I want them to do. I'm interested in this, how to raise somebody up and have them run against a political candidate so that I can win. And I'm going to throw you a softball here, right? Because one of the things that you're doing right now is you're actually starting an organization
Right.
that teaches people. As somebody who's been involved in politics for 3 decades now, you're starting an organization where you're going to be teaching people how to do not just the what, which is what we've been talking about on this podcast. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Now some people are thinking, well, okay, I want to learn more about how. So how do they learn more about how to get it done?
Right.
Mhm.
So I have taught how for 20 years. I did so with an organization that some of our listeners have probably attended schools that I've taught or that we've done, and that was a great opportunity. I helped found it. And we've decided to go separate ways a little bit. There's difference in methodology from here. That's from my perspective, a good thing. And so we founded Founders Promise Foundation, which focuses on equipping people to be more effective in their political fights, how to actually cause pain in a productive way, while at the same time, we call it mobilization and confrontation. You have to mobilize the grassroots, which is where the sameness comes in, and confront the politicians, which is where the contrast comes in. And mobilization with the people, confrontation with the politicians. How do you do that? How do you focus on it? And how should we interact? So it's obviously for those who want to be politically active. It's also for those who want to work and be politically involved, but you're called to something else. Ministry, for example. It's very important for all of the above. So we do a one-day school. We run them on Saturdays because it's available to people. It's the Life and Liberty Academy, and it's a crash course on how to be effective. You won't come away from that if we feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. You won't come away with it with everything you need, but it is a great starter to sitting down and going, oh, okay, I see. Darren, you've been through some of the stuff that that I teach, and that I will be teaching there, and that's how you get from good grief, what even is this, to oh, okay, now I have a basis on which to ask questions, to move forward, and to attend more of the advanced trainings that we will be offering. We don't have a
Yeah,
website up yet, so that is coming, but it's based on the brand new, based on the 20 years of experience and instruction that I've given, along with the 70 years now of in history through my mentor and his mentor. So
Yeah. I will say, I mean, from my experience going through similar training, it's been tremendously helpful for me in the political activism that I do. You know, there are things that work and there are things that don't work. And now it's just like everything else. I mean, God can bless the things that generally don't work.
right.
And he does do that sometimes, but it's better to learn what works and use the best tools at our disposal. And so
He also tells us that the fool pays no attention, but the wise man gives heed to his steps.
yeah,
What is God telling us in Proverbs? He's telling us, pay attention. Some things work and some things don't.
yeah, right,
Yes, I can save you from your mistakes. He does it all the time, but
right,
that's not an excuse to, shall we do evil that good may result?
right.
No.
Yeah, and that's it. And I've learned from I've been pretty actively involved in politics for about 3 years now, very actively in politics for about the last year. And I've learned both the painful way and through coaching and mentoring what works and doesn't work. And I can say that there are things that really work and things that don't really work. And it's really good to have the opportunity to sit down and learn from somebody. And it's not hard, really. It's a lot of work, but it's not difficult to understand. And
It's not
so,
complicated. It can be complex once you start applying the principles and you have all the moving pieces and all the millions of players and all that. But the principles themselves, they can be counterintuitive, but they are not complex.
well, that's just for me when I send you an email. Hey, I got this thing.
Well, yeah, I know. Like, how do you do this? Oh man, I wish there was an easy answer.
Yeah, right. There is none. But I appreciate you coming on the show today. I do want to invite people. I want to encourage people to get involved in that training because I think that it's especially, you don't even have to be interested in politics. Like, you don't have to be like, I want a career in politics. First of all, if you want a
Oh no,
career in
right.
politics, you need to see a psychiatrist. You don't have to be, or I want to be a politician.
As
Uh,
one who has a career in politics, I can attest to the truth of that statement.
yeah, it's more so for people that are like, I want to help. Give me some principles that I can do to make me more
Correct.
effective in the help that I'm doing. And then out of the people that do that, there's a small percentage that continue to want to learn more and things like that. And so
Yeah.
I definitely want to encourage people to check that out as the website gets up and things like that, because I think it's good training. I think more abolitionists, so I'll be the abolitionist guy. I think it would be helpful for more abolitionists to go through this type of training so that we can think tactically in the things that we do. Um, and so then even if you're not, even if you're the street ministry guy or the more of the prophetic guy, which I kind of have a foot in both worlds,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're the prophetic guy, which Callie is tremendously humble and gracious in the way that he tends to go about doing things. But, if you're the prophetic guy, sometimes even going through training like this, what Callie does is go to those guys and tell them, hey, I got this thing that I'm doing, just so you know, is it better to wait or whatever? Um, that's a good thing to do. But also, when you're the prophetic guy, going through training like this can help you think in terms of, okay, when you see the political realm, people that are active in the political realm doing a thing, it helps you to understand, oh, I see what they're trying to accomplish here. And I maybe wouldn't understand that if I hadn't have gone through some of the training. So
Yeah.
I definitely want to encourage people to do that. Usually what we do when we close out here, first, Zach, I want to invite you. How can people find out more about you and the work that you're involved with, and
Sure.
maybe read more about some of the stuff that you're doing?
I highly recommend takeactionforlife.org. That is a website for our national group to abolish abortion, Action for Life.
Yeah.
We are up and working in 26 states. We have legislation going in 10, 11. We're very active this cycle, and this is the first cycle that Action for Life has been doing things. We're also active on the federal level with H 877, which not only declares that life begins at conception, but acknowledges that states can and should restrict and end abortion, and not just regulate, but actually end it, state by state. So it's tremendous legislation. Dennis Sarfate is our president. He's he's a retired pro baseball player, the God saved, and just has a tremendous testimony. His wife was a prime candidate for abortion, unwed mother, one night stand. God provided for her, and she was adopted. But she is just exactly the babies that are getting aborted. So Dennis is very passionate about it. I serve as vice president, and they're another one of our clients. But tremendous stuff. They organized the rally in South Carolina, organized rally in Arizona, and have gathered thousands and thousands of people together already. So please join with us in that action. Go to takeactionforlife.org. You can sign our petitions there. You can get on our list. Opportunities to donate should you feel led to do so. That's the place to start. And in providing some air support for the guys in the trenches who are trying to pass bills in state after state by state. That's our calling.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I appreciate that. So the last thing we do when we jump off an episode is just share kind of a closing word of encouragement. So Callie, you want to go ahead and launch off? Do you have any closing words of encouragement you want to
Sure.
share off of what we did?
And this might sound counterintuitive, because most of our listeners already know that I am anti-voting, but also that my view of, not that I'm anti-federal government, but I think that they've reversed what their intended purpose is. So my encouragement is going to sound a little bit off, based off of those things, or at least it could be. I want to encourage people to be good, godly citizens. Plain and simple. That's it. Be a good citizen. Seek after the welfare of the city, because in that you find the welfare of the children of God. So what does it mean to be a good citizen? I'm not saying it means to vote, but it means to be involved in your community. It means to be involved with the politics, whether it's in the city, the state, or federal. And when you do that, apply the mind of Christ as you do that. That's what I'm encouraging people to do. Whether you're a legislator, a judge, a mayor, a police officer, be a good citizen.
Yeah.
Don't, like, be a godly citizen, and period, the end. That would
Yeah.
be my encouragement.
Yeah. And I think I'll just build onto that, and then I'll invite Zach to close us out here with his closing word of encouragement. And I would just say that part of being a good citizen being a good citizen for me is being a good Christian in terms of my self government. It's being a good husband. It's being a good father. It's being a good pastor. Being a good church member. And one of the things being a good citizen is, in some way, shape, or form, is being involved in the political process, whether it's voting. I know voting is violence, but whether it's that or whether it's but lobbying. I don't even want to call it political lobbying because that sounds like some professional thing that you do, and there are people that do that. But involving yourself in the process to some degree or another. Not everybody's. It's not going to be everybody's main thing, but it needs to be a thing. And right now, the topic that we're discussing is people are killing babies. And it is incumbent upon us as Christians to figure out how we can engage that issue effectively and in a way that honors God. And so I would just encourage people to think specifically about your duty as a citizen, as a Christian who happens to be a citizen of the United States of America by the good providence of God. We have this political process before us. Certainly it's broken, it has its problems, but we can impact it. And so find ways to effectively be involved and do that. All right, Zach, you want to close it out? Word of encouragement here.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And Callie, I don't know if you're coming from a Covenanter perspective or agree with the Covenanter argument on voting, if that's where you're coming from, but I love my Covenanter brothers and I love our Covenanter history. I respectfully disagree with it, but coming from that perspective, I'll say this. There are many different places we find ourselves, and I give this charge specifically to men, young men, middle-aged men, old men. If you are a young man asking, what can I do to work in the kingdom and to see God's rule restored in my nation, in my country, you need to focus first of all on yourself, on your relationship with Christ. Not focus on yourself in the believe in yourself and love yourself heresy that is taught even by Christians.